Eat your slop. Hello, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. I hope you've all had good weeks, and I imagine that you've been desperately waiting for the release of Sonnet 84, because of course it is everyone's favourite sonnet. I'm only joking, you probably don't know Sonnet 84. But you might do, and it might be your favourite sonnet. And if it is, then all the best to you. And please put a comment somewhere and say this is your favourite sonnet. And I'd love to know why. Also, I've got a little parish notice. Parish notice, I feel like that's very British, isn't it? If you aren't from England, Britain in general, do you know what a parish notice is? It's basically just a sort of a bit of information that you're probably might be interested in. I don't know what the equivalent of that in other countries is. Let me know. Anyway, parish notice is I will be doing a little a Christmas episode, I believe, again this year. I did one last year, and you thought I'd exhausted all of the Shakespearean Christmas content, but I might have done. We might just be going around doing the same thing again and again, but I hope I haven't, and there's more to mine. So watch this space for the Christmas episode coming in the next month or so. Obviously, it'll come around Christmas. Makes sense, doesn't it? Right, let's stop dilly-dallying and listen to Sonnet 84. Who is it that says most, which can say more than this rich praise that you alone are you? In whose confine immured is the store, which should example where your equal grew? Lean penury within that pen doth dwell, that to his subject lends not some small glory. But he that writes of you, if he can tell that you are you, so dignifies his story. Let him but copy what in you is writ, not making worse what nature made so clear, and such a counterpart shall fame his wit, making his style admired everywhere. You to your beauteous blessings add a curse, being fond on praise, which makes your praises worse. So, there we have it, Sonnet 84, and look, I'm going to be honest with you, I found this one quite hard. Actually, as it went on, it got a bit clearer in my head, but the first 6, 7, 8 lines were a bit of a struggle. And I was sort of going over in my head, like, is that what that means? Does it really mean that? And I think I've got the, well, you'll be pleased to hear, because you're listening to this sonnet, that I understood the sort of message. But I think he's being quite sort of tricksy and wordy in this one. Almost to his detriment, because it's hard to work out what the hell he's talking about. But again, maybe if you were reading this or listening to this at the time, it would be clear as day. It's just our thick modern minds that can't get our heads around it. But obviously he's talking about other writers again, which has been a theme for the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 sonnets, where he's just been talking constantly about other writers. Just concentrate on yourself, Shakespeare. Give it a rest. It does make me think that you must have been quite a jealous man. Anyway, he's saying that other writers just need to write you as you and not overcomplicate things, which a lot of them seem to be doing, apparently. Sort of making elaborate poems about Shakespeare's muse, about this man that Shakespeare's talking about, and apparently that's actually just making him sound worse. So stop doing that, is what Sonnet 84 is doing. Also, there's a little fable, a little sort of doozy at the end, which we'll get onto, the meaning of that. But let's break Sonnet 84 down line by line and work out what the hell Shakespeare was going on about. So we start with, who is it that says most, which can say more than this praise, that you alone are you? So I think it's useful to be talking about writers here. So he says, who is it? I'd say it's probably useful to think which writer writes the most about you, says the most about you. Which of them can write anything more to praise you other than you are you? That's the only praise that any writer should be giving you. Because you are so amazing, really, that just saying you are you is enough. Then he continues with, in whose confine immured is the store, which should example where your equal grew. So we're running on the same theme here, and he's saying, in your body contains all the beauty. So really there is nothing to compare you to other than to say that you are yourself. They can't say you are like a beautiful rose. They can't say you are like a honey pot, because that's not enough. They can only say you are like yourself. You are unique. You are like no other, I think is what he's getting at in these first 4 lines. Lean penury, within that pen doth dwell, that to his subject lends not some small glory. Now here he's saying only a terrible writer isn't able to improve the person he's writing about at least a little bit. All right, you have to be a really terrible writer to not make someone sound better than they are. Which he's got a point there. I mean, the world is your oyster when you're writing. You can write anything about anyone, and it's not hard to make them sound better. So yeah, I get that, Shakespeare. Nice one. But he that writes of you, if he can tell that you are you, so dignifies his story. So here he's saying, but if the writers who write about you can say that you are you, then that is a dignified enough story. So again, keep it simple. Just say you are you. No flowery language. I've said it before. This is like a bloody Shakespeare masterclass, isn't it? Everyone sit down, get your pens out, make some notes, because I'm about to tell you how to write simply. But in doing so, he's writing a very, very complex and dense sonnet. So he's not really practicing what he preaches here. Then we continue with, let him but copy what in you is writ, not making worse what nature made so clear. So let this writer just copy down what he sees. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't make worse what nature has made so clearly for you, so beautiful. Nature has carved this person in an incredible way. They are gorgeous, and you don't need to overcomplicate it. I've said it before. Don't overcomplicate your words. Just say what you see. And such a counterpart shall fame his wit, making his style admired everywhere. So if this writer or these writers manage to write like this, simply, and just write what they see, they will have conjured up and created such an image that their writing will become famous and will be admired by loads of people from all over the world. So that is a great, bit of advice really that Shakespeare's giving. He's really creating some fantastic writers if they just read Sonnet 84. All you got to do is just write simply and say, you are you. I guess the only catch is if you just put on a bit of paper and say, you are you, and don't embellish anything, it might not land, I guess, is my only worry. I might give it a go, try and publish some poems that just say, you are you, you are you. I mean, you can't say any more than you are you, because that's embellishment. So really, it is as simple as you are you. But that's one poem. I don't know, maybe I'm getting too bogged down with it, but I don't know if the advice is sound. Anyway, to put you out of your misery, we're on to the final couplet. You to your beauteous blessings add a curse, being fond on praise, which makes your praises worse. Now this to me comes quite out of left field. He's just been talking about writing styles and how a writer can best praise his muse, the person that he's directing all these sonnets at. Then he says, look, because you're so beautiful and you're blessed with all this beauty, you curse yourself by loving to hear yourself praised. Because then all these poets are trying to desperately churn out these poems, and the praise is getting worse. They're desperately trying to sort of flatter you, but in doing so, the praise isn't up to scratch. So that's quite an intense final couplet that's come kind of to me out of nowhere. He's talking about simplifying writing and how all these poets just need to say that you are you, and then at the end he says, listen, you need to stop desperately asking for praise, all right, because you are making the praise of you worse. And that is not a good thing. Get it into your head. It's quite direct. I mean, obviously I made it sound much more direct than it is there, but he's saying that he's cursed himself. That Shakespeare's muse has cursed himself by desperately wanting praise. That's not a light thing to say, is it? So, that is Sonnet 84. There we are. Now, I think it's about time we put this to our story. If you remember last week, Shakespeare has had this big poetry slam, poetry off with Ben Jonson, and Christopher Marlowe decided to stick with Ben Jonson. He thought his poetry was better than Shakespeare's, which is, you know, a bold statement. And then Shakespeare sort of went off and was like, well, I don't know what to write about Christopher Marlowe anymore. So he didn't write any sonnets for a couple of months. And then Christopher Marlowe came round saying, hey, you used to write me sonnets all the time. What's happened? Shakespeare's, well, look, you've chosen Ben Jonson here. What am I supposed to do? You want me to keep writing love sonnets to you? You're having a laugh, aren't you? And Christopher Marlowe says, look, I think you could have won me back, but apparently you don't want to write about me anymore. And then he left in a fit of rage. And Shakespeare, realising that he'd struggled to write about Christopher Marlowe because his beauty just simply couldn't be put into words. So he ran after Marlowe with Sonnet 83 that explained how his sexiness and his beauty could not be put into words, and that is the reason why he hadn't written him a sonnet for a couple of months. Let's find out what happens next and how Sonnet 84 fits into all this. Shakespeare finished reading Sonnet 83 to Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe said, Shakespeare, I think that is one of the most beautiful sonnets you've ever written about me, and it explains everything. And Shakespeare sighed a big sigh of relief and said, oh, thank you, Christopher. I knew that I needed to put down in words what I hadn't been able to say to you in words. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? Christopher Marlowe says, it makes complete sense. They hold hands in the snow. Yeah, it's snowing. And Shakespeare says, so what happens now? Marlowe says, well, I'm technically still with Ben Jonson, but I suppose we could spend a night together and see what happens. And so they did. They went to the Nag's Head for 7 or 8 pints of lager, and then went back to Shakespeare's for a night of romance. It was beautiful. In the morning, Shakespeare woke up. He did have a bit of a hangover. And then he suddenly remembered, oh God, I'm teaching today. And Christopher Marlowe says, sorry, what are you talking about, Shakespeare? I've got a lesson that I need to teach to all these aspiring young writers. Oh God, I totally forgot. And Christopher Marlowe says, ugh, God, does it matter? No one's ever going to be as good as you, Shakespeare. And Shakespeare said, I know they're not, but I need to give this sort of masterclass type thing. It's this new subscription service that is quite expensive, actually. I think it's like £30 for a session. It's a lot. And Christopher Marlowe says, well, that sounds like a bloody rip-off. But it's not going to be a rip-off, if it's you doing it. It'll be worth every penny. Shakespeare says, yes, thank you. But what shall I get them to write about? And Marlowe says, well, I suppose you could get them to write about me, little old me. And Shakespeare says, sorry, what do you mean? Marlowe says, well, everyone likes writing about me. I'm gorgeous and simply the most beautiful thing that exists in this world. Shakespeare says, that is true. Marlowe says, yes, well, you did say yourself that I am that, and I've had a lot of writers say it as well. Shakespeare says, yes, I think you could be the subject. Perfect. Quickly, let's go, grab your coat. And with that, they ran through the snowy streets to Shakespeare's masterclass at 7 Chancery Lane. There were hundreds of students waiting for him in the big hall. Shakespeare cleared his throat nervously and stepped out. Ladies and gentlemen, today I will be teaching you about writing love poetry. And I have before you the most perfect subject of all, Christopher Marlowe. Take it in, ladies and gentlemen. Take in his beauty. Right, here's the exercise. You have 10 minutes to write a poem about Christopher Marlowe and his beauty. I'll also write a sonnet. Quills at the ready. 3, 2, 1, go! The 10 minutes started whizzing by, and Shakespeare thought, perhaps my sonnet can also include a little section about Christopher Marlowe being desperate for praise. I mean, he was very, very eager to be the subject of these students' poems, wasn't he? And perhaps if I put a little hint at the end, it will put him off, desperately wanting praise from other writers. Which, of course, as we know, leads to affairs. And I must nip that in the bud. Ding ding, the 10 minutes are up. Shakespeare gathers in the students' poems and reads some of them nonchalantly. They're all crap. Over-embellished crap. And he says, listen, everyone, I've got an important piece of advice. And this advice will be delivered through the form of poetry. Everyone gasps and applauds. They're on their feet. They're loving it. Shakespeare pulls out Sonnet 84 that he wrote mere minutes ago from his back pocket and reads, Sonnet 84. Which writer can say the most about you? Which of them can say more than the rich praise, you are you? In whose body contains all the beauty, so there's nothing to compare you to other than yourself. Only a shit writer isn't able to improve the person he's writing about, at least a little bit. But if the blokes who write about you can say that you are you, then that's a dignified story. Let him simply describe what he sees, not making worse what nature made so perfectly. And that image of you will make him bloody famous, and his style admired by everyone. You actually curse yourself by desperately loving to hear yourself praised so much, because then people churn out worse praise in an attempt to flatter you. So there we have it, Sonnet 84, and it slots into our story like clockwork, kind of, in a way. Good to have Shakespeare doing a masterclass. I'm not sure if it's still available on the masterclass website, you'll have to check. This is not an advert for masterclass, by the way. I just thought it'd be funny for Shakespeare to do a masterclass. Anyway, until next week, maybe spend some time writing some simple poetry, aka You Are You. Bye.